Here our first scripture reading found on page 1527 of your Pew Bible. This is the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 18, verses 18 to 20. Truly I tell you, whatever you bind on earth will be bound in heaven, and whatever you loose on earth will be loosed in heaven. Again, truly I tell you, if two of you agree on earth about anything you ask, it will be done for you by my Father in heaven. For where 2 or 3 are gathered in my name, I am there among them. Please remain standing and let us sing the prayer of illumination. Verse 1 of Spirit, Eve, the living Spirit of Spirit of the living God.
We're working on things.
Spirit of the living God, all afresh on me. Spirit of the living God, all afresh on me. Help me, Lord, help me, use me, Spirit of the living God, all afresh on me.
So as you know, all summer we have been reading together from Paul's letter to the Romans. I told you it was over last week, but I don't know, old habits are hard to break once you get get used to them. So our second reading today comes from Paul's letter to the Romans, chapter 13, verses 8 through 14 on page 1765 in your Pew Bible. Owe no one anything except to love one another. For the one who loves another has fulfilled the law. The commandments, you shall not commit adultery, you shall not murder, you shall not steal, you shall not covet. Any other commandments you can think of are summed up in this word: love your neighbor as yourself. Love does no wrong to a neighbor, therefore love is fulfilling of the law. Besides this, you know what time it is, how it is now the moment for you to wake from sleep. For salvation is nearer to us now than when we became believers. The night is far gone, the day is near. Let us then lay aside the works of darkness and put on the armor of light. Let us live honorably as in the day, not reveling in drunkenness, not in debauchery and licentiousness, not in quarreling and jealousy. Instead, put on the Lord Jesus Christ. Friends, this is the word of God.
Thanks be to God.
You know what time it is. How now is the moment for you to wake from sleep. You know what time it is. What time is it? Significantly, it is 11:25, not 10. It's rally day. We're starting later, which means some of us had the opportunity to take a shower after the night shift before we came in. That was cool, right? Some of us maybe slept a little bit later. Some of us drank our whole cup of tea before we got in the car. Yeah, it's a rally day. It's also when we begin our program year, right? That means Sunday school starts and adult Bible study starts and meetings and potlucks and cooler mornings in the sanctuary are on their way. What time is it? It's certainly, I think, a time to help, to reach out to others who are suffering or in need, right? Harvey, Irma, Jose, Katya, devastating floods in India and Nepal and Bangladesh. The onslaught doesn't even seem to pause. We had planned an offering today to give to Presbyterian disaster assistance in order to help people who were affected by Hurricane Harvey. And now we add Irma to our list. For thousands who never thought a storm this bad would actually reach them, find themselves in the midst of it right this very moment. We haven't even started to understand the devastation caused by these overwhelming storms. What time is it? I think it's time for the church to do a little soul searching. If you watched MTV's Video Music Awards 2 weeks ago, you don't have to admit it here, it's okay. You might have seen the Reverend Robert Wright Lee IV, a young pastor in the United Church of Christ, speaking out against the statues that celebrate the legacy of his great-great-grandfather, Robert E. Lee. If you missed it, he said this: "My name is Robert Lee IV, and I'm a descendant of Robert E. Lee, the Civil War general whose statue was at the center of violence in Charlottesville. We have made my ancestor an idol of white supremacy, racism, and hate. As a pastor, it is my moral duty to speak out against racism, America's original sin. Today I call on all of us with privilege and power to answer God's call to confront racism and white supremacy head on. We can find inspiration in the Black Lives Matter movement and the women who marched in the Women's March in January, and especially Heather Heyer, who died fighting for her beliefs." Cool, right? A pastor went on MTV and said that. Like, isn't that, are we proud of him? He could, like, go to our church, right? Like, he doesn't even know that we studied this, right? And we're behind him. And then, yeah, this week, after some concerned church members confronted him about how they didn't like his reference to Black Lives Matter, a vote on his tenure at the church was scheduled. Rather than cause a rift in the congregation, Robert resigned on Tuesday. What time is it? This fall, we will mark the 500th anniversary of the Protestant Reformation. And more than just marking what time it is, anniversaries can be significant opportunities for us to get back in touch with what really matters, to reevaluate our priorities, to look back and to look to the future. But this particular anniversary is important in, I think, some very significant ways. In her book about the current state of Christianity in the Western world, The Great Emergence, How Christianity is Changing and Why, the author Phyllis Tickle uses a foundational image from Anglican Bishop Reverend Mark Dyer. He says this: "Every 500 years or so, the church feels compelled to hold a giant rummage sale, and we are living in and through one of those sales right now." So what does he mean by that, and how does that help us understand the church today? Well, let's think about it, I guess. What is a rummage sale? Has anyone been to a rummage sale before, contributed to a rummage sale? Tell us a little bit about it, Robin.
All kinds of junk.
All kinds of junk. Where does it come from?
Everybody's house.
Everybody's house. Anything else about rummage sales? How about a garage sale or a yard sale? Same thing?
Everything goes cheap.
Everything goes cheap. How do you prepare for a rummage sale?
Clean out your house.
Just, you know, visual aids are helpful sometimes, right? So sometimes when you're preparing for a yard sale, for a rummage sale, for a garage sale, you get all your stuff out, right? And you might have one box that says keep and another that says sell, right? So what are you trying to get rid of when you prepare for this rummage sale? Clutter. Things that your in-laws gave to you maybe that you don't really like. No? Anybody? That's okay. Yeah. Has anyone read this new book, Marie Kondo's Life-Changing Magic of Tidying Up? Have you read it? She's like a lifestyle and organizational guru, and she says you should take every item in your home, hold it, and see if it brings you joy. And if it doesn't, get rid of it. Now, some friends of mine have said I would have no electric bills or gym clothes if I did that. But decluttering is something that we think and talk about kind of a lot. understand the church and where we are today, right? Okay, so go with me. In the 6th century, so roughly the 500s, about 500 years after Christianity begins, people needed a new way to engage their faith. And what emerged at the time was the model of monasticism that we know today. So monasteries and abbeys became centers of libraries and learning. People were mostly illiterate, and they provided a space for Christians to live out a religious vocation for the first time and to provide for local worship and religious education. So they let go of magical popular theology and decided to keep informed study and corporate worship. Now, about 500 years later, so around the 1000s, came the Great Schism, which resulted in divisions between the Roman Catholic Church and the Greek Orthodox Church that remain to this day. The two sides actually could not agree on what went in the safe and what went in the keep box, and so they chose their own things and split, changing their relationship and changing the relationship of Christians around the world, creating a new reality where instead of one church, there now are choices. So 500 years ago, in the 1500s, the Protestant reformers sorted through the church's doctrines and habits at their time, and they decided what they would keep and what they would let go. And it was the practice of selling indulgences, or money that you would give to a priest in order to ensure that your loved one or you would get out of purgatory and go to heaven. It was the practice of indulgences that Luther said, that's got to go. And as he kept sorting through, right, all the things that were crowding the faith, after he had decluttered and been really, really strict about it, only 5 things remained. And they're called the 5 solas, because in Latin, sola means alone, and each of these things he wanted to keep contained the word alone. So Luther said, this is what we will keep. Faith alone. We will keep Christ alone. We will keep Scripture alone. We will keep grace alone. And in all we do, to God be the glory alone. So, Phyllis Tickle, in her book about this rummage sale that happens every 5 years in the church, marks the time in which we live as a time in which the church is again looking and trying to figure out what we want to keep and what we want to let go. She's finding things like community and mission, that these are the things that we want to keep in the church. But there are other things like top-down structures and attending church just out of social obligation. These things we want to let go. We've already let them go, really. Her book is now 10 years old, but I'm pretty sure that if Phyllis were writing again today, she would also mention that we need to keep a clear, strong, moral voice in our culture and society that is founded in our church. One that doesn't merely support power and the status quo, but one that bears the gospel into all areas of our lives, private and public. In a word, we need a church that loves. Paul could not be clearer to us here. He says, owe no one anything except to love one another. For the one who loves another has fulfilled the law. Love does no wrong to a neighbor, therefore love is fulfilling the law. Sometimes I start to think about all of the wrong the church has done. It starts to make me a little bit angry. Sometimes I meet someone who's not a churchgoer, who finds out what my job is. They have been done wrong by the church, and that's hard to deal with, right? We live in a time where churches preach that God only wants to bless you and increase your stuff. That's how you know if you're saved, if you have money. We live in a time where suicide rates for LGBT youth and violent deaths of transgender persons are at an all-time high. We live in a time where Christian Indonesians escaping to Manchester, New Hampshire, and remaining there illegally to avoid religious persecution in their own country now face the deportation of half of their community. We live at a time when scores of people cannot see their own worth, that they are worthy of love, and that they have gifts and skills to offer to be of service to God and others. Church, we have not been keeping the law. Christians have done wrong to our neighbors for too long. Are we ready, I wonder, to root out our desire for power, our complacency, our habits, and keep only love? In the Constitution of the Presbyterian Church, USA, our denomination is described as reformed and always reforming. So just as we know that one day of culling through our things and deciding what to put out at a yard sale won't solve our clutter problem forever, so one Reformation 500 years ago is not the end of all the work we have to do. Reformation is an ongoing practice, a lifelong journey, and I think we are ready to be part of the church at this exciting moment of change and reformation. You know what time it is, Paul says, how it is now the moment for you to wake from sleep. In order to live into our identity, to become experienced reformers, we're going to be doing some work together this fall in our personal and communal lives, doing a bit of a kind of rummage sale of our own. I'm not going to ask you to Marie Kondo your closet, but we are going to ask each other to think about things we have, our time, our talents, our resources, our money even, to think about the practices and habits that we've developed and decide what we want to keep and what we're ready to let go of. And there's one thing that will not be our guide, and it's this: love. What will help us love our neighbors and ourselves? That's what we should keep. And perhaps it'll be the sound of everything that is unneeded dropping onto that discard pile that will wake us from our sleep. Because friends, when we find ourselves awake to God, we find ourselves awake to life, to hope, to joy even, to true purpose and meaning, to be loved ourselves. We will find ourselves awake to God's mercy, awake to the truth that we are forgiven and free. Even now, the alarm is going off, and we are reluctantly pulling back the covers because we know what time it is. There's a great song that we can sing about what time it is right now. It's called The Canticle of the Turning, and I can give you, it's an insert in your bulletin. Will you join with me in hope and anticipation of what the church is about to become and our part in it? Stand if you're comfortable standing.